and what's written about the candidate, they are also a time for the party to come together, for delegations from different states to meet with each other, for delegations to be in a hotel together. There's a lot of fundraising that happens. I mean, there are things that happen that are not necessarily broadcast that just provide a function for the party itself.
And there are three moments when that can happen. One is, when you name the vice president, you covered that. One is when you have a convention, and one is when there are televised debates. And they get a lot of mileage out of Paul Ryan, and they're going to get some more this week, right?
Right. Well, and this is a unique one, and it's important for Mitt Romney in that this is kind of those three, this is kind of the only block of uninterrupted airtime that Mitt Romney will have. The debates are different. You're not in control of the situation. So this is the one time where the campaign is completely in control of everything from the lighting to the music to what Mitt Romney says. And so he gets this block of time. This is his one chance to sell America on him. And so while the others are important too, this is where he has the most control and where it's important for him to make the sale.
And in this case, he gets to introduce Paul Ryan, who's, we all know Paul Ryan, but to the country, he's a relative unknown. Right? I mean, Daniel Greenberg's with us, and it's got some interesting charts looking at Google data that I think show you what the power of the Paul Ryan pick was, because they tell you when did people go looking for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan online.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with Paul Ryan, and we go back to August of last year, where you can see a spike as people are looking at his presidential run, speculating about that. During the primaries, not so much. We might remember that April Fool's joke that he played on Mitt Romney when he walked into an empty room, and he was prepared to present, and they said, "Ha ha, April Fools." And there was interest in his reading of Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged. That spiked sometime late April, early May. Of course, the rumors of the vetting for the VP, and then when the VP pick was announced, obviously we saw a huge spike on that Saturday. It was like a late Friday night, early Saturday, when the rumors started to come out.
Yeah, we all had sleepless nights.
Yes, exactly. And the number 2 search term that we saw around that time, though, tied to Paul Ryan, was shirtless.
Interesting.
So some of this is just reflective of what people are curious about.
All right. And what about Mitt Romney?
So when we talk about Mitt Romney,
shirtless, right? Okay, no shirtless, right?
No shirtless here.
Okay. Good.
We go back to some of the debate moments, in particular, a couple of moments he had with Rick Perry. The immigration flare-up when they were both arguing over hiring illegal immigrants, and the $10,000 bet that Mitt Romney made. During the primaries, we saw sort of an up and down search interest. There was the Hillary Rosen comment that she made about Ann Romney. There was the bullying scandal when stories came out about Mitt Romney's behavior in school. Then there was the gaffes that he made in London. That was the perception that some people had of his overseas trip. And then, of course, when the VP pick was announced, a lot of people were searching for him as well as for Paul Ryan. So that's an overview of both.
This graphic would be, I would imagine, very disheartening to the Romney campaign.
Number 2 is the gaps.
It's all gaps. It's all just negative.
Well, it's interesting when we look at some of these search trends that, it's at times it is more related to scandals or controversy, but it can also be people just trying to understand what it's about. They've heard it peripherally and they just want to know more to kind of get some context.
What about Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you track this kind of thing closely because of what readers want to see on our site. What surprised you this year? What would you point to?
Well, I guess, I mean, you had this bubble of interest during the primaries because you had this hotly contested primary contest, and then it kind of went away. I mean, I'm curious about the underlying trends on Google. One of the purposes that the convention served for the public is a signal that it's time to start paying attention. Time to tune in. This is getting really serious. There's not that much time left, and there's some big issues at stake. And I'd be curious whether you're starting to see that kind of a pickup, or whether all of you think we will see that kind of a pickup over the next few weeks. I'd assume we would.
I think we will, and I think that in tandem with that right now, too, of course, is all the interest in what's happening in the Gulf Coast with Hurricane Isaac and Tropical Storm Isaac and people interested in that. So we're seeing that there's a rise in search related to both what's happening here in Tampa, the scheduling and so on, but also, of course, what's happening potentially in New Orleans.
I personally, I think that the Republicans surprised themselves a little bit with how much interest they generated during the primaries. You remember that there were lots of debates. Every one of them got reasonably high ratings. And I think that, in a year in which people thought at the beginning this is not going to be much of an election and the Republicans have kind of a second-tier class of candidates, that didn't turn out to be the case at all.
I thought the debates were really interesting. I think one of the reasons that they commanded that kind of attention was they seemed authentic. We see so much in national politics that seems scripted and seems to be orchestrated by campaign operatives. We had these debates that just seemed like you never know who was going to say what gaffe was going to emerge. It was actually a really revealing look into how these people were thinking, and I think that's why they were so popular. I say more debates. I mean, in the future, I think it worked really well.
I think the question about the debates, though, is whether they caused any damage to the Republican brand, just because the topics of conversation tended towards more conservative issues, and they were each trying to kind of take another step to the right from the person in front of them. So it, in terms of that, looking at that chart and seeing that that's when voters were really dialed into the contest, I don't know if that's going to be a great thing.
I did talk to a pollster this week who said that they think some of this likability gap that we talk about, that people like Barack Obama more than Mitt Romney, traces back to that Republican primary season and the drubbing he took, not from Democrats, but from other Republicans, and he's still trying to catch up from that.
So that's not even the Obama advertising avalanche. That came even before the Obama campaign assault.
I was one of the moderators at the debate in South Carolina, and there was the Obama campaign hasn't said anything much more vicious about Mitt Romney than those guys did that night about Bain Capital and vulture capitalism. I think that's right.
I interviewed Newt Gingrich today. Sort of interesting. I asked him just very briefly, does he think a Romney presidency is going to lift the country? His answer was, in general, yeah.
Still in debate mode.
Yeah. He still can't get past it.
Yeah, well, they probably never will. So let's talk a little bit about what happens here this week. Colleen, you wrote about the staging of the convention, and the interesting phenomenon that you have in Mitt Romney, a guy who's not particularly comfortable talking about himself, bragging about himself. So you have a lot of surrogates here who are going to do the job for him.
Right. They're counting on this wide cast of characters, of friends, family members, political allies. And so you'll hear from people you are familiar with, like Governor Chris Christie and Marco Rubio, and politicians, but you're also going to hear from people that you've not seen before, people from Mitt Romney's church, whom he's helped out. You'll hear from some of his family members. You'll see a lot of biographical videos. We saw the first one today showing a little bit about Mitt Romney and trying to seem very patriotic. And you're going to hear more about his business career, but they're really focused on giving you kind of the fuller picture of the man here, and not just telling you about why he's qualified, but also why you should feel a connection to Mitt Romney and why he's relatable. And that extends beyond the convention. I mean, they've recently started letting reporters go to church with Mitt Romney. They opened up their house to TV cameras, gave a tour, made some pancakes, talked about how they shop at Costco, and Mitt Romney irons his own shirt. So they're really trying to build this connection with voters.
Wait. Mitt Romney irons his own shirts?
This is what we're told.
You believe that?
Several times a day, Alan.
We've heard something like that with George W. Bush, right? Didn't we hear that he would bring his own pillow when he was on the road campaigning to hotel rooms?
I think for Romney, he does have a reputation for being a little tight-fisted. So I would not be surprised if he's out there doing his dry cleaning.
So, Alan, is that more than you want to know about Mitt Romney, or not quite enough?
No, I'm surprised. Busy guy. I mean, do you iron your own shirts, Jerry?
No, nobody irons my shirts. Last I checked, they're pretty wrinkled no matter what. So, but this bringing the Mormon religion out from under the table and putting it in full view is really interesting. I've kind of, frankly, I've been surprised they haven't done it more before, because everybody knows it. They kind of dealt with the fears of Mormonism 4 years ago. It's a kind of a character attribute I would have thought they would have wanted to turn into a positive before now, and that's what we're going to get this week.
I think their experience in the primary in 2008 was that it was a net negative. I know that they had done a lot of focus groups and polling, and particularly evangelicals in Iowa were very resistant to the idea. I think if you look at a lot of the polling even early in this race, it was not really the millstone that I think they had planned that it would be, but I do think that Mitt Romney as a candidate was not comfortable talking about it and therefore wanted to kind of keep it at bay. But he's basically focused on only one issue this entire campaign, that being the economy, and hasn't wanted to talk about anything else. So the fact that they're now starting to kind of add things to the list of subjects that he's talking about, both on the campaign trail and then now here in Tampa, it I guess doesn't surprise me. I think they kind of want to expand the net make him look like a fuller person, talk about other parts of his political agenda.
So clearly part of the beauty of this convention for them is that it gets all of us to tackle the issue. I mean, we had a front page story on it. You know, CNN had its big documentary. Everybody's doing their Romney personality stories. Do you guys have any sense yet of what kind of an impact that's having on public perception, or is it just too early to know?
I was kind of struck by one thing. You know, right after Paul Ryan was added to the ticket, there were some stories about Ryan's Catholicism and Ryan as a practicing Catholic. And right after that, I believe, there was a moment where Barack Obama went to church. And I wondered, they don't always publicize that. They don't always sort of talk about Obama's faith. But I wondered if it wasn't a response to the attention being drawn to Ryan's Catholicism, as if to remind the American voters that Barack Obama is a Christian as well.
But it's not just Catholicism, I think. It is the fact that this is an administration that's had a pretty nasty feud with the church hierarchy, which has slopped over, I think, from just Catholics to kind of religious groups in general. Think, well, a lot of this goes back to the Health and Human Services mandate on providing contraception coverage, and the question is, are they hostile to religion? And you don't want to be hostile to religion. And I think you were out with Paul Ryan. Does he use Catholicism? Does he talk about it?
He really doesn't. I was with him the first week that he was on the campaign trail, and he never mentioned the church. I mean, he makes one passing reference to God in his stump speech, but he never talks about being a Catholic. More recently, he's made a couple references to saying, for some reason, he's been saying, I'm a Catholic deer hunter. And so this is the one little tidbit that he offers up, but he doesn't talk about his faith in any depth on the stump. He just
but you
makes
know
that.
what the Catholic deer hunter is about, right?
Yes.
It's like Obama's famous comment 4 years ago that they cling to God and
Yes.
guns, right?
Yes.
The working class voters.
Yes.
Which is a critical demographic. I mean, those are the people that they are really trying to fire up come November.
Is it going to work? I mean, can they get those people with that kind of appeal?
Right now, the numbers are pretty good. I mean, I think to the broader point of speaking about Mitt Romney and his personality, if you look at the polling, he's at a major deficiency. He's trailing the president by 20, 30 points in our last poll. And so that's, I don't know that he needs to match the president, but he needs to eat into it. I think he needs to maintain the gap with the white working class voters, but I think right now the goal of the campaign is to make him connect a little bit more with voters so they feel a little more comfortable about him.
Yeah. Alan, is there anything in particular you're going to be watching for when you see Mitt Romney on the podium by himself on Thursday night?
Well, I've been curious about the same thing that you guys were talking about. I mean, the remarkable thing is, given how much, given all the debates, I don't even know the full number, Jerry, but we were, close to 20. Given all the debates,
19 and 20, yeah.
Given the debates and the attention, that the polls still show that people don't really understand who this guy is or have a feel for him. And it's fine to put out surrogates and have, family talk about him and all of that, but I think people will tune in on Thursday night to see what he does. And if he really is going to stay away from the personal stuff, I think it's going to be tough for him to get much of a bump in the polls, because that's what people really relate to. And as you guys have pointed out, he desperately needs to come out of this convention with a bump. So I guess what I'm going to be watching is, what's going to happen over the next 4 days that could really move the needle for him, because he really needs the needle to move.
2 minutes.
To Alan's point, I think that one of the things that's just struck me about the Google search terms that we looked at, those trends, is that the searches spiked every time there was a story about some personal moment involving Romney. Yeah. It was like there was a story about that maybe he was bullying a student when he was in high school. There was a story about the $10,000 bet gap. It's always, something that offers a window into who he is as a person, where the searches would spike. And I think that there's a reason for that people want to understand this candidate better than they did.
And he shows so very little of it. I mean, that's the thing that amazes me. He told donors about his dad got a free McDonald's for a lifetime, and it jumped out at me because, we've read so many of these. You don't hear that kind of stuff from him on the stump, and here he is kind of revealing it in a brief, candid moment to a bunch of high-dollar donors, and those are the kinds of stories that I think voters want to hear.
Yeah, I think the theory of the campaign was it's all about the economy and jobs. But as you say, people
It's
want to
not.
be comfortable with the guy they're going to pick. So, well, listen, we have a whole week to go. More than 34 seconds tomorrow, I think. So we'll keep an eye on it. And thanks for joining us on Google Plus Hangout.